This is Marshall Masters with Your Own World USA, and today we're going to cut to the chase with Lloyd Pye. We're going to take a very detailed look at the Starchild Project. To get the most out of this interview, I suggest that you go and bring up Lloyd's website. It's www.starchildproject.com. There's a link provided to Lloyd's site on this page. Before we move into the interview with Lloyd, I need to warn you. This interview could leave you wondering about who you really are. And if that gives you pause for concern, go no further. That being said, let's cut to the chase with Lloyd Pye. This is Marshall Masters, and we've got Lloyd Pye on the phone.
Hi, Marshall. Good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
In this interview today, we really want to get into Starchild. I've been following this project with you for some time. And so just to bring our listeners up to speed, if you could give just a brief background on yourself and then also a brief background on Starchild, how it was discovered, and how you came into possession of the skull.
Well, it's hard to do all of that briefly, but I'll do the best I can. I'm from Louisiana, and I was been a writer, a fiction writer for a number of years. But while I was doing that, I was always studying in the field of human origins through hominoids, connecting hominoids, meaning Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, Sasquatch, connecting those creatures to what it meant to the truth of human origins. And as a result of that research, I was brought to the attention of a couple in Texas that owned a skull that was very unusual, and they thought that it needed to be analyzed technically to see if it was indeed fully human, because the truth of the matter is it doesn't look very human. So they called me in, they showed it to me, and told me the story behind its discovery, and I thought it was indeed just what they thought, that it could easily not be entirely human, and it needed to be technically examined to determine exactly what it is. So
just holding it in your hand, what would you see as the big differences between it and a human skull?
Well, because it was found with a human skull, I was able to hold two of them. You can hold the two together in your hand, and you really very quickly see the differences. They are that the Starchild skull weighs half as much as a normal human skull, even though it's the same size as a small human skull. It's about the size of a normal 12-year-old or an adult in the range of 5 feet, tall. A little bit less than average size, your size or my size. And so it weighs half as much as a skull its own size. The eye sockets are perhaps 1/3 as deep as normal human eye sockets. The eye sockets, the eyeballs themselves would, if they're there, if those sockets do indeed contain eyeballs, and the indications are that they did, they would be sitting down at sort of the middle of the nose rather than up at the top of the bridge of the nose. They have the skull has no sinuses at all, not vestigial no upper sinuses, no frontal sinuses, no vestigial sinuses, no sign of sinuses whatsoever. The muscles that attach to the skull to control the lower jaw are about 1/3, they cover about 1/3 the area that the muscles of a normal human would cover. The neck itself seems to be about 1/3 the thickness or the girth of our neck. Where the spine enters the head has been shifted forward a full inch from normal. If you look at x-rays, the inner ears are substantially larger than ours. The brain capacity is substantially larger than ours. It doesn't seem to have what's called inion or external occipital protuberance. If you reach around to the back of your head, there's a knot back there. Everybody has that knot where our two big neck muscles come up from the rear and attach on that, and so it needs some buttressing. The Starchild doesn't have that. It's got a very flat rear head. It's got very large kind of bulbs for the upper left and right parietal, the upper rear of the head, and there's a built-in crease down the middle of the rear of the head. All things that tend to indicate a deviance from normal humanity, and at the same time to represent things that are singular and unique about so-called grays. When people see gray aliens, they give consistent descriptions of how they look. And all of those features that I just described that are externally visible match what people say when they talk about a gray. So there's a strong indication, it seems, that we could make a tie-in between this skull and at least something to do with grays, but we don't know what. Hybridization is our best guess.
Okay, so some sort of eugenics breeding program.
We think so. That's what we're trying to establish and prove one way or the other. I mean, it could prove to be that it's just some kind of bizarre human deformity, but we know now, after considerable research, that there's no known deformity like that. There's no pattern of deformity. There are two kinds of deformity, Marshall. There's genetic, where it's something that is consistent. You can see it again and again. Mongoloidism would be one that everybody's familiar with.
Right.
And then you have birth defects, which are just one-time only sperm-egg misconnects that create a unique form of deviation from the norm, and it's never been seen before, never going to see again. So the Starchild could be something like that, but the odds on that are just astronomically long because, number one, it's been carbon dated to about 900 years ago, so that puts it around 1100 A.D., at a time when there was absolutely no help in a primitive village for an individual born with severe defects from the norm.
At this time, it was common practice with children who were born with deformities to just let them die or kill them.
Yeah, there was absolutely no stigma at all attached to infanticide in primitive villages. If you got a faulty copy, children were very common because there was no birth control, so you got a faulty copy, you just cranked out another one and moved on. So as harsh as that seems now in our current climate and mentality, that is the way it was. So if you were born, let's say, with a cleft palate, one thing wrong in your head 900 years ago, you'd have a chance to make it. If you had a double cleft, very unlikely. You couldn't suck. You just weren't going to make it.
Right.
If you had 3 things wrong, 4 things wrong, you just simply had no chance. The Starchild has everything wrong. There's nothing about the Starchild head that matches up with a human exactly. Everything is different. Everything is different.
Everything's different. And there's a key point in terms of when you're talking about genetic deformities. If you look at what happens in Phoenix, Arizona now, 100 years ago, the people who lived in Phoenix were very healthy. They didn't have asthma. They didn't have emphysema, all of these lung-related cardiopulmonary diseases. Now it's very prevalent in Phoenix, Arizona, because all of the people who had these problems moved into the area and inbred the gene pool. And so now you wouldn't think it in a place like Arizona, but the rate of asthma sufferers there is astronomical because it's genetically inbred. So, if you have a deformed young, yes, it was cruel in one manner, but in another manner, it prevented us from inbreeding defective genes.
Yes, it did, and that was the reason for that in the animal kingdom and in the plant kingdom and humans as well. And so you're right, we did have a sturdier genetic stock producing ourselves back then, and now that we've been for the last 100 years saving many, many, many people that wouldn't have made it otherwise, those defects are being put into the pool, and you're right. But also, too, though, it's good to remember that we carry a lot of genetic defects that we really shouldn't have, and this is a little bit away from the Starchild, but it happens to be relevant to my other research in human origins. But human beings have over 4,000 genetic defects and counting. New ones pop up all